My dear Franz, replied Albert, when, upon receipt of my letter, you found the necessity of asking the Count's assistance, you promptly went to him, saying, my friend Albert de Morcerf is in danger. Help me to deliver him. Was that not nearly what you said? It was. Well, then, did he ask you, who is Monsieur Albert de Morcerf? How does he come by this name, his fortune? What are his means of existence? What is his birthplace? Of what country is he native? Tell me, did he put all these questions to you? I confess he asked me none. No, he merely came and freed me from the hands of Signor Vampa, where, I can assure you, in spite of all my outward appearance of ease and unconcern, I did not very particularly care to remain. Now, then, Franz, when, for services so promptly and unhesitatingly rendered, he but asks me in return to do for him what is done daily for any Russian prince or Italian nobleman who may pass through Paris, merely to introduce him into society. Would you have me refuse? My good fellow, you must have lost your senses to think it is possible I could act with such cold-blooded policy. At this time it must be confessed that, contrary to the usual state of affairs in discussions between the young men, the effective arguments were all on Albert's side. Well, said Franz with a sigh, do as you please, my dear Viscount, for your arguments are beyond my powers of refutation. Still, in spite of all, you must admit that this Count of Monte Cristo is a most singular personage. He is a philanthropist, answered the other, and no doubt his motive in visiting Paris is to compete for the Montyon prize, given, as you are aware, to whoever shall be proved to have most materially advanced in the interest of virtue and humanity. If my vote and interest can obtain it for him, I will readily give him the one and promise the other. And now, my dear Franz, let us talk of something else. Come, shall we take our luncheon, and then pay a last visit to St. Peter's? Franz silently assented, and the following afternoon, at 5:30, the young men parted. Albert de Morcerf to return to Paris, and Franz d'Épinay to pass a fortnight at Venice. But ere he entered his travelling carriage, Albert, fearing that his expected guest might forget the engagement he had entered into, placed in the care of a waiter at the hotel a card to be delivered to the Count of Monte Cristo, on which, beneath the name of Viscount Albert de Morcerf, he had written in pencil, 27 Rue du Helder, on the 21st May, 10:30 a.m. All right, that is the end of chapter 38, and I just want to take a moment to kind of review a little bit of this chapter, because while it was short, I think it's doing a heck of a lot, particularly with the characters of Franz and Albert, specifically not like siloed to just the two of them as characters, but their diverging viewpoints is setting the story up in a way that took me a second of processing before I really hooked into, because there are a few lines today that really played on my memory of things we've encountered so far. So let's just start to break this down a little bit. Albert here today, after winning this argument, which is surprising, he wins the argument in this way that is like a technicality, but the underlying truth is still, I think, on Franz's side. Not even I think, I know it is, because we know what Dante's up to, kind of. But Albert here calls Dante a philanthropist. And we'll get to the Montyon prize in a second, because I did some research on that. But that struck me as like, this is Albert's final assessment of Dante after everything that has happened in Rome. And we know we're at the end of the Rome chapters because Albert and Franz are parting and going their separate ways. I mean, I suppose we can follow Dante or Franz through chapter 39 if they are staying in Italy. The Rome part feels like it's ending because even Franz is going to Venice. But at the conclusion of this kind of section of the book, Albert has determined, well, Dante's a philanthropist. And that stands in contrast to everything we've heard about Dante up to this point. Albert's the only one in Rome, really, that sees Dante as a benevolent figure. Franz, easy to say, is complicated. compared him to a crocodile earlier in these Rome chapters. Countess G compared him to a vampire. Really, it's only Albert that has affection for this man. And it's interesting that he sees him as a philanthropist and that he's essentially saying, I'll do all I can for him. When he also was, do I want to use the term victim? Not really, but I don't know a better term at the moment, of Dante's insistence at them watching the execution. I mean, he was even beyond that, and I guess they weren't technically forced. I mean, that's the kind of gray area Dante works best in, but even beyond that, I mean, he was witness to the dark philosophy of Dante talking about the soul being separated from the body and the reciprocal nature of punishment fitting the crime, and that there often isn't any. Like, he saw all of that, and by the end here, he's saying that Dante is a philanthropist. Whereas Franz still has his skepticism and is asking all these questions that are, I mean, how do we phrase this? I mean, like, Albert in his thing there saying, do you ask whenever you go up to someone where they're from, how they get their money? Like, you don't ask these questions. He didn't ask that of me when he met us. So, like, I think you're being a little unfair to him. And true, but the fact that it's entering Franz's mind to ask them at all is indication of something. Like, you don't ask those things unless there's reason to ask those things. And Albert seems perfectly fine just kind of waving it off. And as we end the chapter and this entire Rome section, there are kind of two diverging viewpoints here between Albert and Franz. And again, this is what I think kind of shows us where we are in the story and with Dante. Albert is at a place where, you know, he's just assuming that this is this rendezvous, the name of the chapter, is just another social engagement, albeit with someone of, you know, higher stature. But he's writing down this reminder to be handed to Dante, you know, that very last line, when he writes down the date, time, address on a piece of paper, as if like to say, hey, don't forget. And if we know anything about Dante, like, this is his entire life's mission. Of course he's not going to forget. In fact, he has manipulated everything toward this. So there's a diverging viewpoint there. Albert's misaligned with the reality of the situation, and I'm not putting that on him. How would he know? Where Franz, on the other hand, seems to be going, something isn't adding up here, and there's something to be slightly, if not worried about, then at least like alarmed about, or keep your hackles up about Dante. And so it almost feels like Albert is saying, I hope this guy doesn't forget. And Franz is like, I'm kind of worried what happens if he doesn't forget. And I think we're at a point where we can start to look at Dante's plan. Obviously, we don't have the details of it, but we can at least start to examine it in a way that, acknowledging we need far more information, but he got what he wanted, essentially, an invitation into the home of Fernand and Mercedes. And he expertly operated it in a way that gives him 3 months to prepare. I mean, he's been preparing for this for, you know, over a decade now, but now it's like, okay, you can count on me being there on the 21st of May at 10:30 a.m. That gives me 3 months to finalize any last details of my plan for Fernand and or Mercedes. I don't know how he feels about Mercedes, but Dante has manipulated the situation to get exactly what he wanted. But what will be interesting to me, and I've alluded to this throughout the chapter, but now it's just a bit more in focus for me to articulate, which is he's been so narrow focused on getting this invitation from Albert and convincing Albert of what he needs, that he's left a kind of, I wouldn't say a trail of destruction behind him, but there are all these kind of odds and ends that can compromise his plan. Specifically, like, is it a threat to him if Countess G and the Roman society sees him as a bit of a pariah? That's not the right word for it, but, like an outsider, someone a little dangerous and skeptical, and someone to be concerned about. Countess G, Franz. I mean, Pastrini and all of his servants, seem like they're transactional and aren't going to ask too many questions. I'm sure they deal with all kinds of different types of people throughout their businesses. So we're in an interesting place, and I don't know where we're heading. This is one of those divergent points. There's a fork in the road, and I'm curious where Dumas is going to take us next. But it's taken me so many chapters now to kind of reinvest. What is it? What was it? Chapter 31 that we were introduced to Franz? Yeah, chapter 31, Italy, Sinbad the Sailor. That was when we were introduced to Franz, and now at the end of chapter 38, 7 friggin' chapters. How many pages was that? Let me look at that. At almost about 150 pages it took before we got to the point where I feel tethered and reinvested. I've never been divested from the story, but just, I feel like I've been communicative over like, oh, okay, I have to learn a whole bunch of things. All of a sudden, the perspective of this book has shifted considerably. And now I feel like I'm back on track and right at the point when there's a fork in the road, and who knows if Dumas is going to switch it up again. I'm a little nervous about that. Okay, this is a long episode. I didn't realize that. Let me give you the last bit of research I did today. The Montyon Prize is a actual thing. Clearly it was, but it's referenced in today's episode as if it is a, specific thing, and it is. But the way that Helder had said it felt kind of offhanded, so I'm like, I don't know, what level of credibility and, like, thing is this? And here's what I found. The Montyon Prize is actually a series of prizes that French philanthropist Antoine de Montyon had established, and it was awarded essentially by French academies. And the prizes were given out for things like acts of virtue, charitable works, public service, general improvements to society, or advances in scientific and medical fields, anything that really benefited humanity. And I'm wondering if this is like a sibling of, if not a precursor to, the Nobel Prize. As far as I can tell, it was still given out as of 2022. Oh, there is a line here saying these prizes were considered by some to be a forerunner of the Nobel Prize. But it's a real thing. And do we think Dante is, honored, deserving of it? TBD. I'm going to say no. Okay, that's all I've got for chapter 38, but you know what we do here. We don't take a day off. We do continue every day. Was that confusing? You know the drill by now. I'll see you here tomorrow for chapter 39. I am so thankful that you are all listening. I appreciate you being here. You can always reach out if you have any questions, you have any thoughts, suggestions, over at patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Stay tuned after the credits for the cool things that you get for being a contributing member over there. Okay, until tomorrow, when we start chapter 39, I'll see you then. Okay, bye. The Countdown of Monte Cristo is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. This show is produced, edited, and hosted by Landon Solano. The original text of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Theme song by Magic Solo. If you want to support the show and others like it, visit patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.